Have you ever felt it? That quiet, persistent hum of wrongness beneath the surface of everyday life. That sense that you are playing a role, following a script you never auditioned for. You obey rules you did not write, chase goals you did not choose, and carefully sand down the edges of your own soul to fit into a space that was never meant for you. But here is the truly disturbing part. It isn't some shadowy force that holds you in place. It's you. When a friend risks everything to follow a dream, a voice inside you, the voice of the system, calls them reckless. When your own child questions the logic of an arbitrary rule, you find yourself reciting the very lines of obedience you once resented. You have been masterfully trained to guard the walls of your own confinement. This isn't a flaw in your character. It's the result of a perfectly executed design. An architecture of control so subtle, so pervasive, that it has become the very air we breathe. Because if you were ever allowed to remember what the ancient Hermetic texts taught about your power, what sages across millennia knew about your true nature, this entire fragile theater would crumble. The control is only possible because of a single, foundational lie you were taught to believe, that you are small and the world is big. The truth is, the prison was never real, the door was never locked, and the key has been in your hand from the moment you took your first breath. You are not a person having a spiritual experience. You are an infinite, eternal consciousness having a very convincing human experience. And right now, you are pretending to be an obedient, limited being. This isn't poetry. It's the most accurate description of your condition. You were born with a creative power that can shape reality, a consciousness that is a fractal of the universe itself, yet you spend your days consumed by anxieties that were programmed into you. Worries about bills, about the opinions of strangers on a screen, about rules designed to keep you predictable and compliant. The most ingenious trap ever devised is not one with bars of iron, but one with bars of belief. And you and everyone you know diligently maintain them. We are beings of boundless imagination living lives of repetitive routine. We are wired for cosmic exploration, yet we tread the same mental pathways day after day, like circuits in a machine. We grant our power to systems that would collapse overnight if we simply stopped believing in them. And most effectively of all, we police one another. We are a society of inmates watching each other, ensuring no one dares to remember the world beyond the walls. It is a conspiracy of silence, a self-regulating matrix of conformity. No guards are needed when the prisoners have been taught to fear freedom. No chains are necessary when the fear of judgment is stronger than any shackle. The system's genius is that it convinced you your limitations are your own, that they are natural, real, and for your own good. But here is the secret that unravels it all. You are not on a path to enlightenment. You cannot become what you already are. The divine, infinite consciousness you seek is not a reward at the end of a long, arduous journey. It is your factory setting. It is who you are, right now, beneath the noise, beneath the programming. The problem has never been an absence of divinity. It has been an excess of conditioning. From your first day in a school that taught you what to think, not how to think, from your first exposure to a media that shaped your desires instead of informing your mind, from every lesson that taught you to fit in rather than to stand out. Every single institution has played a part in a grand, unspoken project to make you forget who you are. Why? Because a human being who is fully aware of their infinite nature cannot be controlled. A soul that knows its own divinity cannot be sold a lesser version of itself. Helena Blavatsky, in the 19th century, saw this with perfect clarity. She traveled the world, gathering the scattered fragments of this ancient knowledge, and presented it to a world that was being rapidly industrialized and conditioned. She reminded us that every human holds an indestructible divine spark, but that layers of social programming have been deliberately placed over it, like coats of lead paint over a masterpiece. It's not an accident, it's a design. The system needs you to feel dependent. It needs you to believe you are just a consumer, a worker, a number. Because if you knew what you really were, the game would be over. The ancient Hermetic principle of mentalism states it plainly. The all is mind, the universe is mental. This isn't just a philosophical idea, it is the operating system of reality. The universe you experience is a projection of mind. Not just your mind, but the one universal mind of which you are a unique, irreplaceable expression. When you accept the limitations whispered into your ear since birth, you are actively co-creating a limited reality. This is the secret the architects of control have always understood. Their power isn't in armies or laws, it's in shaping your perception. It is in the subtle engineering of your fears. Think about it. The fear of not being enough, the fear of being alone, the fear of failure, the fear of what others will think. None of these are inherent to the human soul. A child does not fear authenticity, they learn to fear it. They learn that conformity is rewarded and uniqueness is risky. You learned this lesson so well that the fear now feels like your own voice. It calls itself prudence. It calls itself responsibility. But it is the ghost of your programming, the echo of your training. Be a good citizen, they say, which means obey without question. Don't rock the boat, they whisper, which means accept the status quo even if it's unjust. You were taught to be your own jailer, and you learned the job so well you forgot you were also the prisoner. This brings us to the most critical turning point. If you are already an enlightened being living under a collective hypnosis, then liberation isn't about learning something new. It's about unlearning. It is an act of demolition. Every time you act from fear, you reinforce the walls of the prison. Every time you judge someone for being different, you are polishing the bars. Every time you choose the comfort of conformity over the fire of your own truth, you are choosing to remain asleep. No government is coming to set you free. No institution will ever hand you back your power. The transformation is an inside job. It begins the moment you decide to stop pretending you are anything less than magnificent. The moment you remember you were always free and simply chose to forget. This forgetting was not a gentle drift into slumber. It was a meticulously architected descent. The ancient civilizations knew the truth. The Vedas, thousands of years ago, declared Tat Tvamasi, thou art that. You are not a drop in the ocean. You are the entire ocean in a drop. The initiates of the Egyptian mysteries understood that every human soul contains the seed of Osiris, the potential for resurrection into divinity. The Gnostics, whose texts were systematically hunted and destroyed, taught that the kingdom of heaven is not a place you go to after you die. It's a state of consciousness available to you right now. So how was this foundational truth buried so deep? The answer lies in the evolution of control. Early empires ruled with the sword. They conquered lands, enslaved bodies, and enforced obedience through brute force. But this form of control is inefficient. It is expensive, it breeds constant rebellion, and it requires perpetual vigilance. A more sophisticated form of power was conceived. Why control the body when you can colonize the mind? Why use force when you can make people desire their own servitude? The new strategy was to create a slave who believes they are free. The Council of Nicaea in 325 AD was a masterstroke of this psychological warfare. Under the Emperor Constantine, a version of spirituality was institutionalized that systematically severed the direct connection to the divine. Texts that spoke of inner divinity, like the Gospel of Thomas where Jesus says, "Cleave a piece of wood and I am there," were branded as heresy. In their place, a new narrative was installed. You are born a sinner, flawed and broken. You are separate from God and you need an institution, an intermediary to bridge that gap. Your salvation is not within you. It depends on your obedience to an external authority. With the stroke of a pen, humanity was demoted from God in potential to worm in need of saving. Yet, the true knowledge was never completely extinguished. It was preserved in the hidden streams of esoteric traditions. In the intricate diagrams of the Kabbalistic tree of life, which maps the path of divine energy into human form. In the ecstatic poetry of Sufi mystics like Rumi, who spoke of the direct, loving union with the divine, it resurfaced during the Renaissance with the rediscovery of Hermetic texts, fueling a revolution in art, science, and human potential. The system's architecture is revealed by another Hermetic principle: as above, so below. The macrocosm of the universe is reflected in the microcosm of the individual. If you can be convinced that you, the microcosm, are small, powerless, and fragmented, then your experience of the universe, the macrocosm, will mirror that belief. This is why modern education is designed to fragment knowledge. You learn science separately from art, history separately from philosophy. You are taught to see the world in disconnected pieces, preventing you from ever seeing the whole picture. History becomes a list of dates and wars, not the story of evolving consciousness. Science is presented as a rigid set of facts, not a beautiful, ever-changing model of reality. You are kept busy memorizing the parts, so you never have a chance to grasp the whole. Then, in the 20th century, this process was weaponized. Edward Bernays, the nephew of Sigmund Freud, pioneered what he called the engineering of consent. He understood that by targeting the unconscious desires and fears of the masses, you could make them demand things that were against their own interests. Modern advertising was born. It doesn't sell you a product, it sells you an identity. It sells you a solution to an anxiety it first created. Politics stopped being about debating ideas and became the science of manipulating emotion. The media ceased to be a source of information and became an engine of programming. You think your opinions are your own, but how many of them were carefully planted in the fertile soil of your unconscious mind? The final, brilliant layer of this system is social self-policing. You don't just absorb the programming, you become its agent. When a colleague questions the corporate narrative, you feel an uncomfortable urge to defend it. When a public figure steps outside the ever-narrowing window of acceptable discourse, you participate in the chorus of condemnation. You have become an unpaid, unwitting guardian of the matrix. This works because of the law of vibration. Everything has a frequency. Fear, guilt, and shame vibrate at a low frequency. Courage, love, and authenticity vibrate at a high frequency. The control system is a low-frequency broadcast. It keeps you tuned to the station of fear. But when you deliberately cultivate higher states of being, you literally change your frequency. You become invisible to the old program. Awakening isn't about adding anything to yourself. It's about shedding the dense layers of low-frequency conditioning, so the brilliant, high-frequency light of who you truly are can finally shine through. The most insidious control is the one you believe is your own free will. Neuroscientists like Benjamin Libet have conducted experiments that are deeply unsettling to our sense of self. They found that the brain activity corresponding to a decision can be detected seconds before the person is consciously aware of having made it. What you experience as a moment of choice is often just your conscious mind catching up and creating a story to explain a decision that the unconscious has already made. Now, consider the terrifying genius of the system. It doesn't need to control your conscious thoughts. It just needs to program your unconscious, and you will passionately defend that programming as your own identity, your own beliefs, your own choices. This programming is installed through fear, but not the overt, monstrous fear of a tyrant. It's a quieter, more pervasive fear, disguised as virtue. The fear of disappointing your family is relabeled as respect. The fear of losing your social standing is rebranded as ambition. The fear of being truly alone is repackaged as the search for love. The fear of being judged is called politeness. Each of these subtle fears acts as a silent shepherd, guiding your decisions from the shadows of your mind, ensuring you never stray too far from the herd. And you, in turn, impose this shepherding on others. You warn your friends about the dangers of the unconventional path. You correct your children for being too loud, too different, too honest. You become a node in the network, transmitting the very control signals that keep you trapped. You are both the victim and the perpetrator in a cycle that preserves the prison. This is the great illusion the mystics called Maya. Not just the illusion that the world is as it seems, but the deeper, more dangerous illusion that you need the system for your own protection. That without its rules there would be chaos. That without its authorities you would be lost. This is the foundational lie, and it is a lie that you tell yourself every day. It's a fractal surveillance system. You monitor your own thoughts for anything too rebellious. You curate your own behavior to meet external expectations. Then you turn your gaze outward, monitoring others to ensure they do the same. Why do we participate in this? Because deep down, in the forgotten core of our being, we know how powerful we are. And that untamed power feels dangerous. So we choose the familiar security of the cage over the vast, unknown expanse of the sky. We would rather be a victim of the system than take on the terrifying responsibility of our own freedom. A tiny fraction of the population understands these mechanics. They don't need to rule with an iron fist. They just need to maintain the mental software that ensures the billions police themselves. It is a psychic virus that uses the host to replicate and spread. The education system is the primary installation vector. The media provides the daily software updates, defining the boundaries of acceptable thought. You are given the freedom to choose between pre-approved options. You can argue about politics, as long as you never question the system of politics itself. You can be unique, as long as your uniqueness fits into a marketable category. It is a carefully curated illusion of choice. To break this cycle, you must first become the observer of your own mind. When you feel the impulse to judge someone, ask yourself, is this coming from a place of wisdom or a place of programming? When you censor your own thoughts, ask, who installed this censor? Every time you obey automatically, pause and ask the most revolutionary question of all. Who does this obedience truly serve? People are breaking the matrix every day, but the system is quick to neutralize them with labels. If you expose inconvenient truths, you are a conspiracy theorist. If you question the official narrative, you are a denier. If you advocate for radical peace, you are an extremist. These labels are antibodies, designed to isolate the awakened cell before it can inspire others. The system's ferocious reaction to dissent is the greatest proof that the dissent matters. You don't censor lies. You censor truths that are dangerous to the established order, so you can continue to sleep. You can work another 30 years in a job that numbs your soul, obey rules that insult your intelligence, and live a life that is a pale imitation of the one you dream of in your quietest moments. But the consequences of remaining unconscious are not abstract. They are real. The epidemic of depression is not a chemical imbalance. It is a soul sickness from living an inauthentic life. The rampant anxiety is not a disorder. It is the screaming of your inner being, telling you that something is profoundly wrong. You are not just a victim in this. You are an accomplice. Every act of fearful obedience, every moment of silent conformity, pours your precious life energy into the very system that imprisons you. But what happens when you decide to wake up? First, fear's grip on you loosens. Not because you become fearless, but because you see that most of your fears were ghosts, illusions projected onto the wall of your mind. The fear of scarcity in an abundant universe. The fear of judgment from people who are themselves trapped in fear. The fear of death for a consciousness that is eternal. Second, you cease to require external validation. When you know who you are at the core of your being, the opinions of others become irrelevant noise. This isn't arrogance, it is sovereignty. Your life becomes an expression of your inner truth, not a reaction to external pressure. And third, and most importantly, you become a glitch in the matrix. Your simple, authentic existence becomes a silent question posed to everyone around you. You don't have to preach. Your example is the sermon. When you live in freedom, you remind others that the cage door is open. The Hermetic teachings tell us that all creation involves both the masculine principle of action and the feminine principle of receptivity. To awaken, you must not only reject the old system, the masculine act of breaking chains, but you must also embrace and nurture your true nature, the feminine act of cultivating the soul. It is not enough to fight the system, for what you resist persists, and it is not enough to meditate passively while the world burns. The true path is to act in the world, but from a place of awakened consciousness, not from your conditioning. To rebuild your life not based on what is safe or expected, but on what is true. This is terrifying because it feels like you are losing everything. But what are you truly losing? A job you dislike, relationships based on dependency, a life built on fear. You are not sacrificing anything of value. You are simply letting go of illusions. And when you persist, something miraculous happens. The universe rushes in to support you. Not because of magic, but because of physics. When you begin to vibrate at the frequency of your authentic self, you naturally attract people, opportunities, and realities that resonate with that frequency. The choice has always been this simple and this stark: awaken or decay. Everything we have talked about returns to this. You are an infinite consciousness that was tricked into believing it was finite. The system isn't external. It runs on the software in your mind. The fear that guides you is not your own. It was installed. And your enlightenment is not in the future. It is here now, buried under the noise. The only thing that truly matters is the courage to live in accordance with this truth. Everything else is a distraction, a grand and noisy show designed to keep you from remembering. The change must begin within you, because the external world is nothing more than a mirror of our collective inner state. As long as billions remain asleep, the world will reflect that sleep in the form of conflict, scarcity, and control. But when you wake up, you introduce a new frequency into the collective field. Your light activates the light in others. Knowledge alone is not enough. You can understand the theory of swimming perfectly and still drown. Awakening requires practice. It requires you to stop being a consumer of information and start being a practitioner of transformation. And the most ancient, most direct, and most powerful practice has always been the same: the art of stillness. In the silence between your thoughts, the programming dissolves. Yogis call it dhyana, Buddhists call it zazen, mystics called it contemplation. The name does not matter. The practice is universal. When you quiet the incessant chatter of the conditioned mind, your true nature emerges from the depths. Silence is the solvent of illusion. Stillness is the soil in which your true self can finally grow. Meditation is not a relaxation technique. It is a deprogramming technology. Every conscious breath you take, every moment you spend in pure, thought-free presence, you are reclaiming your mind. You are rewriting the code. You are remembering how to be free. And from that freedom, a new world is not only possible, but inevitable.